Hi everybody, welcome. We're super excited to join you here today. We have some great news regarding our SoFlat paint line. Today we're going to introduce 20 brand new colors to SoFlat. I'm joined here with our brand portfolio manager, Bryce, and Bryce is going to introduce himself in just a moment, but I'm going to give you a little context to our chat today first. We are going to go ahead and talk about our SoFlat paint line very quickly, its development, give you some interesting insights, reveal the 20 new colors, and then we're here to answer your questions. I'm joined with our wonderful production team here at our workshop at Golden Factory in upstate New York. I've got Mike, who's one of our materials and applications specialists. Hi, Mike. He's going to be in the chat, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them in the chat. We also have a link to a support page. We have information at that page. You're welcome to jump on there and take a look. There's a color chart with all the new colors. There's some articles and videos on SoFlat, as well as a form where we're asking for your input. And in the discussion today, you'll see how we actually do use your input when thinking about how we develop new products. So please utilize that form and join us in the conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm Stacy. I'm the Education Program Director here at Golden. And Bryce?
All right. So again, I'm Bryce Lampe. I'm the Brand Portfolio Manager. And so a lot of what I do here at Golden is to make sure that we're meeting the artist's needs with our products, with our services and information, and also support we provide. A big part of that is letting artists know all about the things that we make, and also listening to artists to kind of guide the development of new products like these new SoFlat colors. That's
great. So we released the SoFlat line in 2021. When conceptualizing this paint line, what went into that? What were the considerations?
All right, so we saw artists working in big color fields, flat, even color, and we saw a need for a paint that worked in a very particular way. A lot of our other product lines, like fluid and heavy body, the pigment, whether the pigment's transparent or opaque, glossy or matte, we let that just kind of happen. We let the pigment shine through. With SoFlat, we really had a particular set of parameters we were after. We wanted that flat matte sheen across the color line, so all the pigments, to have that equal matteness, and also to have a higher level of opacity, and to have a leveling quality, so it would be easy to paint large areas without the appearance of brush strokes.
So I have an example. If you can go to the overhead camera. Here's an example of a naphthol red light in heavy body, fluid, open, high flow, and SoFlat. And when I put this across the raking light here, you can see how just this particular pigment in an acrylic binder tends to go glossy, but the SoFlat is quite matte and flat. So that just illustrates what you just said quite well.
Yeah, beautiful.
All right, great.
Yep.
All right, so why is this flat, matte acrylic paint? Like, there's a lot of paints on the market called acrylic gouache or gouache. How is this similar or different?
All right, so traditional gouache is resoluble in water, which means that even after it dries, you can go back in with water and then that'll move around again. But it's also matte like SoFlat and has really good high opacity and coverage. There are a number of acrylic gouaches out there on the market, and they target some of the same attributes, namely being matte and higher level of opacity, but some are a little thicker and tend to need to be let down with water like traditional gouache. Others are thinner and ready to paint right out of the jar. So there isn't really a clear definition of exactly what acrylic gouache is. So with that confusion, we really wanted to avoid that and make sure that we let artists know exactly what to expect from SoFlat, and that is the matte sheen, the leveling quality, and then a higher level of opacity than similar colors in our other color lines.
So if we go to the overhead camera, I'll show you. So this is our Quinacridone Magenta in SoFlat. It's one of our new colors. It is, if you flip over to the back, which you won't see on your camera view, that's okay. It's a PR122 pigment. And what I did is I went ahead and took a traditional gouache of the same pigment and painted it out over here. So this is with a little, it was a thicker paint. You had to add water to get it to, spread. So I did that here, and then I added a little more water. This is our SoFlat on the watercolor paper with a little water. And this is our fluid Quinacridone Magenta. And when I hold this up to the light, you can see how the fluid has that shine, whereas the traditional gouache and the SoFlat are both very matte. And one of the wonderful attributes of a true acrylic paint is that, I can go in and it's still, it's locked down. That paint's not going anywhere. But if you wanted something to be permanent, this is probably a better choice, because with your gouache, that's going to reactivate because it's water soluble, and that's a traditional gouache. So with that said, the Quinacridone Magenta tends to be a transparent color. If you see this here, this in the fluid, is quite transparent, and we did have to do some work, which we'll talk about in the development now, about how we get to this with some of the new colors. So let's go ahead and jump to that. So, these colors, we had this paint line for some time. Can you go ahead and talk about why we're developing these colors now?
All right, so there's two main reasons why we're launching these new colors. One is listening to artist requests. We've had a lot of people asking, for more colors. And another was that when we originally launched the 40 colors, we had hoped to have a few more, and we were planning on that. But that balancing act of matteness, and opaque and leveling is really difficult to achieve. So some of the colors, we just needed to spend some more time in the lab to perfect. The matte surfaces caused by things in the paint, really the surface diffracting the light. And so as you add things into the paint to make it really matte and have that level, that even sheen across the surface, it tends to thicken the paint up. So it was that balancing act and trying to get that leveling quality as well as the opacity that we really struggled with. And another thing that we weren't really happy with, that we needed to kind of contend with, is on some of the pigments, getting the level of opacity that we really wanted. Quinacridone Magenta is a perfect example of that. It just in its nature is a transparent pigment. If we tried to make it a bit more opaque, adding a touch of white or other things to get better coverage, then you tend to tint the paint too and change its color. And Quinacridone Magenta is just it's such a beautiful color. We kind of had to find that balancing point and be comfortable with that. And you can see here in this drawdown, it is still, even in SoFlat, while it's more opaque than other lines, still got a bit of transparency, and we're very clear about that on our labeling. We have the symbol on the front of all of our labels. This is a symbol for semi-transparent, whereas a more opaque color like this light violet that completely filled in square, that's an opaque color.
Correct. So we were able to increase the opacity, but not really make it opaque, or we would have to jeopardize the beauty of that particular pigment.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So we were able to maintain that, as on the sample that I showed, you could see how vibrant that still is, even though we were able to increase the opacity somewhat. Yeah, that's great. I know our team did a lot of that testing. It took a lot of tests to get that right.
Development to
get
where we were happy with both the color space and as much opacity as we could squeeze out without changing really the nature of the pigment.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead and take a look at these new colors. So we had 40 in the line originally.
Yeah.
Bryce?
All right. And so in the introduction of these new colors, we filled in some gaps in the color spaces with additional reds, blues, greens, and added the neutral grays. And we also introduced a number of light value colors. And these light value colors are convenient tints of a pigment and white. We introduced these colors recently in our heavy body and our high flow lines, and they've been extremely popular. They, are nice, bright, intense colors, and since they're pre-mixed tints, it's really easy to get that consistency from jar to jar. You don't have to try to find that perfect sky blue, and mix that from 2 different colors every time you paint. You can just get the same thing time after time.
And I will say that I've even enjoyed using those as a replacement for a white and creating some really interesting mixtures as well. So we have the Titan Buff and the Neutral Gray, and those end up being really quite interesting color mixture, replacements for white. So that's wonderful. So we are here for your questions, so don't forget to ask them in the chat. Bryce, before we move on though and jump into questions, tell us a little bit about why these colors in particular, out of all the possibilities. Why
so these particular colors, again, there were some glaring color space. A lot of artist requests for Quin Magenta, for a crimson. We didn't have a really good crimson color in the line, so that was another frequent request. And Cobalt Blue was another one that, that color space just saw a lot of requests from artists.
Yeah.
And then the light value tints, we've seen that artists really love them in our other color lines. So as we were expanding, we looked to see what is working in the other products that we make. What are artists kind of falling in love with, and kind of replicate it here.
That's great. So we don't have any questions at this time. I just want to remind you that we have a link in the chat to a space you can go to and take a look at our SoFlat information. And there's a form in there. We'd love to hear from you, hear what suggestions you might have, and we wish you all the best. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you.